Alright, it's the next morning on our pesto making project. You can see I'll open the lid here in a second on the basil seeds, but you can see that condensation on the top of the lid, and that is what we want. It means it's nice and humid inside there. All that water that's trying to evaporate, it's getting captured and creates a nice humid environment, especially important for the first 24 to 36 hours. I'm going to take the lid off. The reason I'm doing this actually is to show you there's kind of that white membrane around the seeds, and I don't know if it's a protective coat or exactly what that is, but it's very common. It's a good sign for the basil. Lift that up, get a closer look. See, it looks kind of weird. That's part of the germination process. Basil does this. It creates that kind of this white little gelatinous covering, and then pretty soon that will disappear and we'll start to see the seedlings emerge. So more to come. So far so good. Alright, so we're at day 2. Take off the cover here, check on the seeds. And I'll zoom in a second, but we do have some seeds starting to emerge. Now that we've kind of got past that 24-hour, 36-hour mode, it's time to back off on the water. So what I'm going to do, make a slight mess, but I'm just going to dump all this water out. And you can see in 1 second. So get rid of that, throw it back in. Now you can see the cubes are still soaking wet, very wet, and they'll stay wet. That's the advantage of rock wool. It actually does a good job of holding on to water, but it also has a nice balance with air. Alright, so zoomed in, you can see these right there are starting to come out. This guy, one over here. So now, like I say, you back off on the water a little bit. The rock wool will hold on to the moisture, and I'll keep an eye on this. I'll put the cover back on. You can see the seedlings starting to emerge. We're at day 2. We are on our way to making pesto. We'll check back again. Thanks. And as you can see, I put the cover back on. Water will continue to try to evaporate out of the rock wool, but it will stay moist, and we'll get maintain its humidity. Alright, we're at day 3 here, and now, take the cover off, you'll see less humidity on the lid. Now you see things are really starting to pop. Got a ton of seedlings starting to emerge, and I think what I'm going to do, given the high germination rate, I'm actually going to move some of these guys around. Got some cubes prepared, and I'm going to take some of these. Instead of having 5 seedlings on 1 cube, I'm going to start to separate them out a little bit, thin them. I'm going to get set up for that and come right back. I'm going to zoom in real quick. You can see quite a few. They're just coming out like crazy now. It's hard to see, but they've got those nice fuzzy roots on them. Love to see that, nice and healthy. Means they're not too saturated. Alright, so I'm going to try to thin these seedlings out a little bit. The way I'm going to do that is, you can see I've got another tray here, soak the rock wool cubes just in water. I'm going to take some of the seedlings that are on some of the original cubes and move them over. I'll show you what I mean by that. Poke a little hole. I'm just going to try to carefully scoop one of these up. You really want to be careful, they're fragile at this point. So I'm going to just basically there we go. just put him in there. And now he's oriented towards the sky. You know, you can really do this when you're at home. Right? This is hard in a commercial greenhouse. Or if you're trying to maybe, it's probably worth it even to sell them. This goes a long way in terms of just ensuring you have healthy growing plants. Really careful. I think that's going to be good. You'll notice I don't even know what this thing is. I think it's from like maybe my wife's nail care kit. It's got a nice rounded edge, so it's not going to cut into the seedlings at all. It actually works great, obviously, as you can see, for poking holes, but also scooping the seedlings. I think I'll take one more off of this cube. Make a nice hole. You can see this. Try to scoop it at the seedling, the seed part, not the root shoot that's coming out. Just lay it in there, kind of guide it in. You know, you do run the, ooh, that worked out well. There is a chance these, disturbing them like this they may not survive. Very good chance they will though. I'm going to get repositioned and keep going here. Alright, so you can see all these seedlings do develop at different paces or rates. I am going to take that top one that's laying flat on its side and move it to another cube. I wanted to zoom in to show you what I'm really looking at, but this one you can see it's actually orienting and going into the rock wool. And the top part of the seedling, it's going to start moving to the light. Whereas this one's flat on the surface. If I didn't have a bunch and this was just laying there like that, I would leave it alone. But this one's perfect to get moved to a different cube to thin it out. It'll probably orient, no problem. And that first root shoot will probably go into the rock wool, but this will speed it along. And by moving it to another one with a hole pre-oriented, I guess, we're going to help it get oriented and get into the soil. So I've got this guy. I'm going to poke the hole first. Kind of wide. I'll scoop this. Use the pointy side, even though it's not. It's a rounded point. Stuck to the rock wall. Well, so this is delicate, so I'm not going to force the issue. Just going to use my thumb and put them into that hole. There we go. Should be. It's going to be fine. Push them in a little bit. Alright, so we got 4 done. We'll come back later as these grow more. There'll be more that will be better candidates. Right now, a lot of them are just shooting out, so they're not really primed to do this to it yet. Alright, so one thing I was just talking about is, why I do this. And I find that basil is one of those plants that does better when it has space to grow. When you crowd them too much, they just don't produce as well as they could. And you see it more on the back end. They're fine when you have them and they're small, but then they start to crowd each other out later on. So giving them a little bit of space now, I find it just works way better in the long run. You get far more leaves. They thrive better. This white membrane stuff is kind of sticky, so they do stick to the rock wool plus the other seedlings. I got that guy separated, and hopefully he's going to be fine. I think we've got a couple more on this one. I think there's 3. Yeah, I think I can get a couple more off of this, so then we'll kind of, oh, that guy's perfect. I don't know if it's staying in the camera well or not, but let's see that guy. So you can see how they stick to the rock wall. Alright. And sometimes you just kind of use what it'll give you. In this case, it's my finger. So I'm going to orient it so it gets into that hole. Just kind of push it in there. Hopefully get it down nice and low. Let it slide right off. Alright, so you notice one thing I just did is I organized or combined all the rock wool cubes into one pot, and I am going to leave the lid off. I might cover it at night, maybe not. This is part of, we're entering that phase where it's time to start to dry these guys out. The seed has absorbed the water. The first root, the radical, has sprouted in most of these. And now you do want that root, to start to go look for water. So that we are going to get into that delicate balance period. You know, this first 24 to 48 hours, maybe 72 hours is pretty easy. You almost can't have too much water. We are now entering that phase where you can have too much water, so it's time to start backing it off. And I will probably start to thin these out more over the next couple of days as they continue to grow and sprout. I'm not sure how, I think I'm at 22 plants now, maybe get up to 30, we'll see. So I brought the basil out today, part of our pesto making process, or project. You can see I did add more cubes, split the seeds out further. I'm up to 28 cubes here. Each cube does have a plant, but I brought them outside today. I may throw them under light later because they're starting to stretch. And you can see some of these guys, like this guy here, is stretching. It's not good. This guy's stretching a little bit as well. And they're fine, but getting some light is going to help keep them a little bit shorter. They need the light. The sun's the best light. But overall, they're coming along, doing well. This guy's stretching. This guy's stretching a little bit. So the basil's been doing well. Continued to separate it out. I think I'm up to 30 different cells now, or rock wool cubes, and it's continued to grow. But it's time for light, and I did have them outside for a little while yesterday. But it's very difficult to maintain the moisture out there in the hot sun and the breeze, and we get these random rain showers. So got a nice day of sun, put on some nice growth. You can see they have, some of these are really starting to, these guys are real, I like these the best. They're short and stout, putting out their first leaves. They didn't stretch too much. They're just nice, healthy, vibrant seedlings. But I'm going to move them under light. We've got a new home for them, put them under LEDs, and we'll show you that in a second. So yeah, we'll move them to their new home now. So here's the new home. It's basically a bread rack with a bunch of LED lights on it. I'll show a bigger picture, a zoomed out picture of that another time, but the lights these guys are under, you can see the distance is not very far. It's maybe 5-6 inches, 4 to 6 inches at most. They're low wattage LED bulbs. They don't generate a ton of heat, which is ideal. but they also don't generate a ton of light, which is not ideal. And that's why I do have them so close. With that lack of light, you got to get them close, but the lack of heat allows you to do it. So I'll zoom in on this. This will be their home for the next few days. By not having a ton of heat generated, you can really control the water, the moisture levels. So you really just want to keep a close eye on that. It's water management. You just can't do the same thing outside, at least not down here. Not unless you're in a greenhouse in a cooler climate where you control the temperature. The current daytime heights right now in South Florida, it's the middle of October, it's going to be 89 degrees today. Just hard to manage. So we move them inside. It's almost the reverse of anybody in a northern climate where you might be able to throw them outside or have them outside during the spring or summer. So our climates are almost reversed. Today our basil plants are going to get their first fertilization. They're up to size now where they can't just live off the water that's been in these rock wool cubes. I've also let the cubes dry out quite a bit the last couple days. I'm zoomed in, so I'll zoom back out in a second, but there's not a whole lot of water in there. And you can see they're starting to, they're starting to grow. Want them to stretch too much, so we got them under the light, and we'll give them some food now. Feeding these guys is pretty simple with our 2-tray system. Just lift the first tray out, which holds all the cubes and seedlings. Pour the fertilizer into the bottom tray, or the water. This is the same as watering. This mix just happens to have fertilizer mixed in. It's a very light fertilizer. Oh, put too much in. It's not the worst thing. I'll let them get soaked. It's going to completely saturate the cubes. I'm going to have to pour some water out though. Poured way too much in. I am holding it up so it doesn't fully go down and flood them, but there. So that is way too much. I'm going to dump some out. So to keep this so it's not a total mess, just going to use another tray, lift this tray up, let the excess water drip out. And slide this tray. I'll pull that one out. And I'll just pour that onto another plant, probably one of the house plants we have. It's that simple. The beauty of the 2-tray system. Lift it out, pour your water, this case fertilizers in the water, and then feed them from the bottom. Zoomed in on the basil. It's about 24 hours since I fed them yesterday, and they've really popped off. Just wanted to share that growth. They don't need a lot of food at this stage or a lot of fertilizer, but they do respond well to a light feeding. And as you can see, they've just popped off in the last 24 hours since that first feeding. Need to make room for some lettuce I just sowed, and these basil or pesto projects come along great. So I'm going to move this up to a different light and much brighter light. So this light, much brighter. This probably, I think it's 100 watts equivalent or something like that. It's a full spectrum light. It has both a vegetative spectrum and a flowering spectrum. So I've got both on just to maximize the light. These guys are coming along great. And then what we'll do is I'll move the freshly sown lettuce right here. I'm going to grab that. One thing I did want to mention is under these lights they do generate quite a bit more heat. Like that's definitely warm to the touch. So you do need to keep an eye on them. I am trying to dry them out a bit. You can see there's no real standing water. I think there's one random drop here. But for the most part, let me zoom out a little bit. It's a little tight. There's a little water in there, but for the most part, over the last, I don't know, day or so, I've really started to dry these guys out. And that'll get the roots going. And the rock wool does retain a lot of water. It's great. It's a little bit easier to manage. But once they're soaked, so you do need to let them dry out a little bit. And these guys probably will get planted on Saturday. Today's Thursday. Planning on moving these out to the hydroponic system Saturday, probably Saturday afternoon. I'm going to feed the basil this morning. I'm going to do the standard approach I've been taking. I'll lift it up, pour the water in the bottom, and let it come up through the bottom. I need a little bit more. And one of the reasons I'm feeding them is because you look at this one and see that root coming out. If I don't keep them slightly moist, the ends of the roots will start to turn brown and die off. We don't want that. So I'm being fairly aggressive. I don't have to fertilize them today, but I want to. They're going into the garden tomorrow. They're coming along great. They look nice. If I zoom in a little bit, kind of see that first full leaf is starting to come in. So, yep, they just got fed, watered and fertilized.